Korean Mafia boss had survived 3 assassinations, 2 betrayals, and a federal investigation that buried men twice as careful as him. But none of that prepared him for the little black girl standing in front of his car with $1 in her hand. She didn't scream, she didn't beg, she didn't even flinch. "Sir," she said softly, "I need help." The street was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet men like him paid for. His guards moved instantly. 1 step forward, 1 breath away from disaster. Then she held up the $1. "This is all I got." A single bill, wrinkled, warm from her palm. Men had paid him with fear before, with blood, with silence. No one had ever paid him with everything they owned. "What do you want?" he asked, voice low. Her answer made his expression change, not with amusement, not with cruelty, but with anger so sharp it scared the men who worked for him. "I want you to scare someone worse than you." That was the moment the city shifted. Because when a child offers her last $1 to a man the world fears, she isn't buying violence. She's buying protection. And the monster she chose was about to remember what it meant to be human. The rain had just stopped over Brooklyn Heights, leaving the sidewalks slick and shining like mirrors. Steam rose from the subway grates on Montague Street. And somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Though not for him. Never for him. 9-year-old Amara Collins stood under the awning of Sal's Bakery, now closed for the evening, clutching a single $1 bill so tightly it was damp with sweat. Her pink backpack hung crooked on one shoulder. Her white dress, the one Mama said was for church only, had dirt on the hem. Across the street, parked illegally, yet untouched by parking enforcement, sat a black Maybach with windows so dark they looked like portals to nowhere. Everyone on the block knew who it belonged to. Kang Dae-hyun didn't run from police. Police rerouted traffic when he arrived. NYPD captains looked the other way. Federal agents pretended not to notice, because some men were too dangerous to inconvenience. Some men had enough power that the law bent around them like light around a black hole. Once a month he came to this neighborhood, not for business, but silence. A ritual, coffee from the same corner shop, same bench in Cadman Plaza Park. Same 30 minutes where the world pretended he wasn't dangerous. Until today. Amara crossed the street alone. Each step felt like walking into a storm no one else could see. Car horns seemed distant. Voices faded. The city itself seemed to hold its breath. Dae-hyun felt her before he saw her. Children usually sensed predators. They avoided him instinctively, the way rabbits freeze when shadows pass overhead. But this one stopped directly in front of him. Too close. His driver tensed. His security detail stiffened. Hands moved toward concealed weapons. Amara held out the $1. "Mister, this is all I have." Kang Dae-hyun was 38 years old, though some said he looked younger, and others swore he looked ancient. It depended on the light, on what you'd done to earn his attention. He'd been born in Seoul, raised in Los Angeles, and rebuilt himself in New York City, brick by bloody brick. The tattoos climbing his neck and covering both arms weren't decoration. They were a resume. Each design told a story most people wouldn't survive hearing. The rose with thorns encircling his throat. That was for his father, who taught him that softness was suicide. The dragon coiling down his right forearm. That was for the night he took control of the West Coast smuggling routes, leaving 3 rival organizations in ruins. The scattered cherry blossoms on his left arm. Those were for the people he couldn't save. The ones who made him realize that power without purpose was just another kind of prison. He didn't smile anymore. Hadn't in years. Smiling implied joy, and joy was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. Joy made you careless, made you vulnerable, made you remember what it felt like to be human. And humans broke too easily. His empire stretched from the port of Newark to the San Francisco docks. Shipping containers that customs never checked. Warehouses that fire inspectors never visited. Businesses that thrived without advertising, built on loyalty, fear, and the understanding that Kang Dae-hyun kept his word, whether that word was a promise or a threat. But every month, for 30 minutes, he allowed himself this. The coffee from Giuseppe's on Hicks Street, the bench overlooking the East River, the illusion that he was just another man enjoying the view of lower Manhattan's skyline across the water. It was September. The air had that perfect crispness that made New Yorkers forget how much they hated summer. Leaves were just beginning to turn in Brooklyn Bridge Park. Tourists walked past without recognizing him. To them, he was just another well-dressed Asian man with expensive taste and visible ink. They never looked close enough to see the calculations happening behind his eyes. The constant threat assessment. The way he catalogued exits, counted potential witnesses, measured the distance to his car where Min-jun waited with a hand always near the concealed weapon in the door panel. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Messages could wait. Business could wait. For 30 minutes every month, the world could handle itself. Then Amara Collins appeared. She emerged from behind a parked delivery truck, small and determined, moving with the kind of purpose that didn't belong to a child. 9 years old, maybe 10. Dark skin that caught the late afternoon sun. Hair pulled back with a pink bow that had seen better days. White dress that was too nice for this neighborhood, this time of day, this weather. Min-jun saw her first. His hand moved to his weapon. Dae-hyun raised one finger, a gesture his men knew meant wait. The girl crossed Hicks Street, without looking both ways, without the fear most children had of traffic. She walked like someone who'd already made a decision, already calculated the cost, already accepted the consequences. She stopped 3 feet in front of him. Too close for a stranger, too bold for a child, too direct for someone who should have sensed the danger radiating from him like heat from concrete in summer. Behind him, his security team materialized from positions he knew they held. Doorways, parked cars, second-floor windows. 6 men, all armed, all trained to eliminate threats before Dae-hyun even acknowledged them. And this 9-year-old girl had walked straight into the center of that lethal geometry without hesitation. "Mister," she said, and her voice shook despite her courage. "This is all I have." She held out a $1 bill. Dae-hyun stared at it, then at her. In his world, people paid with information, with favors, with their silence or their screams. They paid with property deeds, signed under duress, with access to routes and networks, with betrayals of people they'd once called family. No one had ever offered him everything they owned, because that's what this was. Not a dollar, not a transaction. A 9-year-old girl was standing in front of the most dangerous man in Brooklyn and offering him her entire net worth with a hand that wouldn't stop trembling. "I need help," she continued, each word carefully chosen. "And Mama says when you need help, you pay what you can." The street went silent. Even the traffic on the BQE seemed to fade. Even the harbor across the river seemed to still. Dae-hyun felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. Uncertainty. Men didn't approach him this way. They sent intermediaries. They requested meetings through channels. They understood the protocols, the hierarchies, the unspoken rules that kept order in the underworld. But children had no such education. Children operated on pure instinct and desperation, and this child had chosen him. "Who sent you?" His voice was low, careful. In his experience, children were weapons too. Sympathetic, unexpected, perfect for delivering bombs or recording devices, or planting evidence. Nobody sent me. She lowered the dollar slightly, but didn't put it away. I came myself, because Mama says you're the scariest person in Brooklyn, and I need someone scary. Behind him, Min-jun made a sound, something between a laugh and a warning. Dae-hyun ignored him. What's your name? Amara Collins. I live in the pink building on Atlantic Avenue. Apartment 4C. I'm 9 years old. I go to PS 261. My mama works at the hospital, and I'm not supposed to be here. Honesty. Complete, unflinching honesty. She wasn't lying or performing. She was stating facts the way soldiers reported intelligence, knowing that incomplete information could be fatal. This child understood stakes. Why do you need someone scary, Amara Collins? She met his eyes, held them, and in that moment, Dae-hyun saw something that made his chest tighten with an emotion he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten its name. Recognition. This child had the same look he'd had at 9 years old, the same understanding that the world was not fair, not kind, not designed to protect people like them, the same calculation that sometimes survival meant seeking out the monsters and hoping they pointed their teeth in the right direction. My uncle, she whispered, he hurts me, and I want you to make him stop. Amara had been planning this for 3 weeks. It started the day she heard the ladies at the laundromat talking. Mama had sent her to pick up the clothes. 2 loads, Tuesday special, $5 total. Amara had been sitting in the plastic chair near the detergent vending machine, doing her math homework and minding her business the way Mama taught her. That's when Mrs. Patterson from 6B started talking to Ms. Rodriguez from across the hall. You see that man in the Maybach? Mrs. Patterson said, folding towels with sharp, angry movements. That's Kang Dae-hyun, Korean Mafia. They say he controls half the shipping that comes through Red Hook. I heard he killed a man in Los Angeles with his bare hands, Ms. Rodriguez added, lowering her voice like the walls might be listening. 12 years ago. Made an example. And the police don't touch him. You know why? Because he's smart. Doesn't deal drugs in neighborhoods with kids. Doesn't run girls. Keeps his business away from civilians. But cross him? Mrs. Patterson made a slicing motion across her throat. You just disappear. Quietly. Amara kept her head down, pencil moving across her math worksheet. But she was listening with every cell in her body, because she needed someone who scared people, someone the police couldn't touch, someone who could make problems disappear. She needed someone worse than Uncle Jerome. Uncle Jerome wasn't really her uncle. He was Mama's boyfriend, though Amara didn't understand why Mama stayed with him. He didn't work. He didn't help with rent. He didn't smile at Mama the way Amara remembered Daddy smiling before he died, back when Amara was 6 and the world still made sense. Jerome showed up on Thursdays after Mama got her paycheck. He stayed through the weekend. And when Mama worked night shifts at Methodist Hospital, Jerome was supposed to watch Amara. That's when the bad things happened. It started with comments, then touches that lasted too long, then threats, delivered in a voice so calm it sounded like love to anyone who might overhear. Don't tell your mama. She's got enough problems. You want to make her life harder? This is normal. This is what families do. If you say anything, I'll make sure you both end up on the street. Your mama needs me. You understand? Amara understood. She understood that she was 9 years old and trapped. She understood that Mama was exhausted from double shifts and barely keeping them afloat. She understood that telling would break something in Mama that was already cracking. So she kept quiet. Until 2 weeks ago, when Jerome pushed past commenting and touching into something worse. Something that left bruises shaped like fingerprints on her arms. something that made her throw up in the school bathroom and tell the nurse she had the flu. That's when Amara decided quiet wasn't protection. Quiet was surrender. She needed a weapon. And in Brooklyn Heights, the most dangerous weapon walked around in expensive suits and drank coffee alone on Tuesday afternoons. Finding Kang Dae-hyun's routine wasn't hard. Men like him were creatures of habit despite their danger, or maybe because of it. Patterns felt like control in a world that was chaos. Amara skipped the last period at school 3 Tuesdays in a row. Told her teacher she had a dentist appointment. Forged Mama's signature on the excuse note the way Jerome had taught her to do when he wanted her home early. First Tuesday, she spotted the Maybach parked on Hicks Street at 4:15 p.m. Watched from behind a mailbox as the man emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, tattoos visible even from a distance. He walked to Giuseppe's Coffee, ordered something, walked to the bench overlooking the river, sat for exactly 30 minutes. Left. Second Tuesday. Confirmed the pattern. Same car. Same time. Same coffee shop. Same bench. Same 30 minutes of stillness, while the city moved around him like water around a stone. Third Tuesday. Gathered her courage. She took the $1 from her piggy bank. Emergency money Mama said was for just in case. Amara figured this qualified. She put on her church dress because Mama always said you dress nice when you're asking for help. You show respect. She practiced her speech in the bathroom mirror. Sir, I need help. This is all I have. Can you make someone stop hurting me? Too much. Too desperate. Men like him probably dealt with desperate all day. I need to hire you. I have $1. Better. Businesslike. He was a businessman, right? Illegal, yes, but still business. My uncle hurts me and I want you to make him stop. I'll pay you everything I have. Perfect. Clear. Direct. No room for misunderstanding. She left school at 3:45 p.m. Walked the 12 blocks from PS 261 to Brooklyn Heights. Waited under the bakery awning, heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The Maybach arrived at 4:13 p.m. 2 minutes early. Amara took that as a sign. The universe bending in her direction. Luck, finally, on her side. She watched him emerge from the car, and her courage almost failed. Because he was bigger than she'd expected. More real. More dangerous. The tattoos weren't decorations. They were warnings written in ink. His men were everywhere suddenly. Flanking. Watching. Hands near weapons she couldn't see but knew existed. This was a mistake. A stupid, desperate 9-year-old mistake. But then she thought about Thursday. About Jerome's hands. About Mama's exhausted face. About the way silence had become a cage she couldn't escape. And Amara Collins crossed the street. Your uncle hurts you, Dae-hyun repeated, voice flat. And you want me to make him stop. It wasn't a question. He was processing, calculating, deciding if this was real or some elaborate setup. Children had been used against him before, insurance fraud, custody battles, planted witnesses. But something about this girl's eyes told him she wasn't performing. She was surviving. Yes, sir. How does he hurt you? Amara's grip tightened on the $1. The kind that leaves marks people don't see. The kind that makes me want to stop existing. The kind I can't tell Mama about, because it'll break her. Every man behind Dae-hyun went still. He saw Min-jun's jaw clench, saw Mikhail, his Russian enforcer, take one unconscious step forward. These were violent men, career criminals, people who'd done terrible things for money. But some lines weren't about legality, some lines were about humanity, and this child had just described someone crossing every single one. Your mother doesn't know, She works nights at Methodist Hospital. She's a nurse. She does double shifts because Daddy died and we needed money, and Uncle Jerome—" Her voice cracked. "He said if I told, we'd lose everything, that Mama needs him." "Does she?" Dae-hyun leaned forward slightly. "Need him?" "No." Amara's voice hardened. "We were fine before. Broke, but fine. He doesn't pay rent, doesn't buy food, just takes up space and—" She stopped, swallowed. "And he takes other things too." Silence. The kind of silence that preceded violence. Dae-hyun had built his empire on control, on calculated decisions, on keeping emotion separate from business because emotion made you sloppy, made you careless, made you human. But sitting on that bench, watching this 9-year-old girl offer him $1 to protect her from a predator, he felt something he'd carefully murdered 15 years ago. Rage. Not the hot, reckless kind. The cold, systematic kind. The kind that dismantled lives with surgical precision. "What's his name?" His voice could have cut glass. "Jerome Macklin. He lives in Bed-Stuy, Harmon Street, but he comes to our place on Atlantic Avenue every Thursday." "What do you want me to do to him?" Amara looked directly at him. "I want you to scare him worse than he scares me. I want him to feel what I feel. I want him to know that if he ever comes back, if he ever even thinks about me or Mama again, someone worse than him will find him." She held out the $1 again. "This is all I got, but it's everything." Dae-hyun didn't take the money. Instead, he stood, slow, deliberate. 6'2" of controlled violence in a designer suit. Amara's courage faltered for half a second, but she didn't run. "Put your $1 away," he said quietly. Her face fell. "But you don't pay for this. This isn't business." "Then what is it?" He looked down at her. This tiny, desperate, impossibly brave child who'd walked into hell to save herself because no one else would. "Justice," he said. Then he turned to Min-jun. "Find everything about Jerome Macklin, where he lives, where he works, what he owes, who he knows. I want his entire life in a file by midnight." Min-jun nodded once, already moving, already pulling out his phone. Mikhail stepped closer. "How permanent?" Dae-hyun considered. In his world, problems disappeared permanently, quietly, efficiently. But this wasn't his world. This was a 9-year-old's world, and she'd have to live in it long after he was done. "No bodies," he said. "Nothing that traces back to her or her mother. But I want him destroyed, completely, systematically. I want him to understand that he touched something he shouldn't have, and I want him to spend the rest of his life knowing that if he ever makes that mistake again, I'll finish what I'm about to start." He looked back at Amara. "Go home. Have dinner with your mother. Do your homework. Pretend this conversation never happened. Thursday, when your mother goes to work, you lock your door. You don't let anyone in, understand?" "Will he?" "He won't be there, Thursday or ever again." Tears filled her eyes. Not sadness. Relief. The kind of relief that comes when you've been carrying something too heavy, and someone finally says, "I'll take that." "Thank you," she whispered. "Keep your $1, Dae-hyun said. "One day, when you're older, you'll understand what you did here. You'll understand that the worst monsters sometimes remember they were human once. And you'll understand that your courage, that $1 you were willing to give, is worth more than anything I could ever do for you." Amara nodded, started to leave, stopped. "Sir? Are you a bad person?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Dae-hyun thought about all the things he'd done, all the lines he'd crossed, all the reasons the world feared his name. "Yes," he said honestly, "but not today." By midnight, Min-jun had assembled a file that made even seasoned criminals uncomfortable. Jerome Macklin, 34 years old, 2 priors, one for domestic assault, another for drug possession. Both cases mysteriously dropped when witnesses recanted. He worked part-time at a warehouse in Red Hook, off the books, moving stolen merchandise for a crew that operated independently of Dae-hyun's organization. He owed money to 3 different loan sharks, had warrants in New Jersey for unpaid child support, 2 restraining orders from previous relationships, and a pattern of targeting single mothers, moving in, taking control, and leaving destruction in his wake. Dae-hyun read the file in his office in Sunset Park, a legitimate import business that served as the face of his operations. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor. Ships moved in the darkness, some carrying legal cargo, others hiding the kind of things customs never found. "He's trash," Min-jun said, sitting across from him. "Connected to nobody important. Low-level, disposable." "Worse than trash," Mikhail added. "Trash serves a purpose. This is poison." Dae-hyun closed the file. "I want him isolated first. Pull every line of credit. Make sure every debt gets called in at once. I want his life to collapse financially before we ever touch him physically." "Easy," Min-jun said. "He owes Big Tony $3,000. We buy the debt. Tony's been looking to retire anyway. We make it $10,000 overnight, compound daily interest, due immediately." "What about the warehouse job?" "Already handled. Made a call. His boss thinks he's been stealing, because he has, but now there's proof. He'll be fired by morning. Won't be able to show his face in Red Hook without someone thinking he owes them something." Dae-hyun nodded. "Social connections?" "He drinks at O'Malley's in Bed-Stuy. Friends with a few guys. Small-time dealers, bookies, nobody dangerous. We spread a rumor he's cooperating with, NYPD. That he wore a wire during a buy. Let his friends distance themselves." "The mother?" Min-jun hesitated. "Jolene Collins, 42. Nurse at Methodist. Works ICU, night shift, 4 nights a week. No criminal record, no red flags. By all accounts, she's just exhausted and desperate and made a bad choice in trusting Jerome." "She doesn't get hurt," Dae-hyun said firmly. "Not emotionally, not financially, not at all. She finds out about Jerome, but she never knows we were involved. Anonymous tip to her supervisor. Let her see documentation of his priors. Let her see who she let into her life and around her daughter. Her decision to remove him comes from her, not us." "Smart," Mikhail said. "Protects the kid too. No questions about why Jerome suddenly vanished." Dae-hyun stood, walked to the window. Manhattan glittered across the East River. Millions of lights. Millions of lives. Somewhere in that sprawl were good people and monsters and everything in between. And in Brooklyn Heights, a 9-year-old girl was probably lying awake, wondering if the scary man she'd given $1 to was going to save her or forget her. He wouldn't forget. Couldn't, even if he wanted to. "Thursday," he said quietly. Before Jolene Collins leaves for work, she gets an envelope. Inside is documentation of everything Jerome Macklin has ever done. Restraining orders, arrest records, testimonials from previous partners, and a note typed, untraceable. "You deserve better. Your daughter deserves safety. He is not who he pretends to be." "She'll confront him," Min-jun said. "Let her. We'll have people nearby. If it escalates, we intervene. But she needs to be the one to end it. For her dignity, for her daughter's respect." And when he leaves, Dae-hyun's expression went arctic. "That's when we show him what happens when you hurt children." Wednesday passed like a held breath. Dae-hyun's organization moved with the precision of a surgical team. Debts got called in. Jerome's bank account was mysteriously frozen for suspicious activity. His parole officer, Yes, he had a parole officer, received an anonymous tip about undisclosed cohabitation, which was a violation. By Wednesday evening, Jerome Macklin's life was fraying at the seams, and he had no idea who was pulling the threads. Thursday morning, 6:15 a.m., an unmarked envelope appeared under Jolene Collins's door. She found it before her shift, opened it while drinking coffee, and went pale, reading the contents. Min Jun's team watched from a parked van across the street. They had audio devices, cameras, a complete surveillance setup, not because they expected trouble, but because Dae-hyun had ordered zero risk to Amara or her mother. When Jerome arrived Thursday evening, Jolene was waiting. The confrontation was brief, explosive, and ended with Jerome being physically thrown out while neighbors watched. He screamed threats. She called the police. Officers arrived, saw his record, saw the restraining orders, and strongly suggested he leave the borough entirely. Jerome left, but only geographically. His hatred didn't dissipate, it concentrated. And that's exactly what Dae-hyun had been counting on. Jerome Macklin made his first mistake Friday afternoon when he tried to go back to Atlantic Avenue. He got 3 blocks away before 2 NYPD patrol cars pulled him over for expired registration. While they ran his license, his parole officer conveniently called with an emergency meeting requirement. If he missed it, violation. If he went to it, he'd be late getting to Jolene's apartment. He chose the parole office. Spent 4 hours there answering questions that went nowhere, filling out forms that meant nothing, all while his anger simmered into rage. Saturday, he tried to call Jolene. Her number was disconnected. He tried to message her on social media. Accounts deleted. He went to Methodist Hospital, demanded to see her. Security escorted him out with a warning that became a trespass notice. Every avenue closed, every door shut, and he couldn't understand why. Sunday morning, he found a note tucked under his windshield wiper. Plain paper. Typed message. Leave her alone. This is your only warning. He crumpled it, threw it into the gutter, went to O'Malley's to drink and complain to his buddies about the system, about women, about respect. But his friends weren't there, or they were there and saw him coming and suddenly remembered appointments elsewhere. Within 20 minutes, the bar was empty except for Jerome and the bartender, who served him 1 drink and then asked him to leave. Why? Because you're bad for business. What the hell does that mean? The bartender leaned in. Word is you cooperated with cops on the Henderson bust. Word is you're wearing a wire right now, so finish your drink and get out before someone decides to check. Jerome left, confused, paranoid, isolated. This was Dae-hyun's method. No violence, no confrontation. Just systematic dismantling. Take away support structures. Take away resources. Take away the illusion of power. Make a person understand they exist at the mercy of forces they can't see, can't fight, can't negotiate with. Monday, Jerome's landlord informed him the building was being sold and everyone had to vacate by the end of the month. Never mind that Jerome had been renting month to month in a building that had been being sold for 5 years. Never mind that only his unit got the notice. Tuesday, his car was towed for unpaid parking tickets he definitely didn't have, until suddenly the city database said he did. He went to contest them. The clerk informed him he owed $4,500 in tickets dating back 18 months. Pay or the car gets auctioned. He didn't have $4,500, didn't have $500. Wednesday, Big Tony's replacement, a woman named Carla, who scared men twice her size, found Jerome at the bus stop and informed him his debt had been sold, was now $13,000 with compound daily interest, and she expected payment by Friday. I don't have. Then you'd better find it, or find religion. Because if you don't pay, we take it out in other ways. Understand? Jerome understood. He was trapped, suffocating, circling the drain. And he still didn't know who was doing this to him. Thursday, 1 week after Amara Collins had approached Dae-hyun, Jerome Macklin sat alone in his increasingly empty apartment, staring at eviction notices and debt collection letters, and tried to figure out what he'd done to deserve this. His phone rang. Unknown number. Yeah? Jerome Macklin. Not a question, a statement. Male voice, calm, terrifying in its composure. You have 2 choices. You leave New York tonight and never return, or you stay, and everything that's happened to you this week becomes permanent. Your debt becomes real, your reputation becomes true, and the people protecting you from something worse lose patience. Who the hell is this? The person you should have feared before you touched a child. Jerome's blood went cold. I didn't. You did. And she told someone. And that someone is far worse than you'll ever understand. This is mercy. This is your last exit. Take it, or I make a phone call and Carla stops being your biggest problem. Silence. Jerome's mind raced. Jolene must have hired someone. Or her family, or it didn't matter. What mattered was the voice on the other end wasn't bluffing. The kind of power it took to orchestrate everything that had happened this week wasn't street level, wasn't amateur. This was organized, professional, connected. This was someone he couldn't fight. Where do I go? Not my concern. Away is the direction. Tonight is the timeline. I don't have money for... There's an envelope under your door. Cash. Bus ticket to Atlanta. One way. You arrive there, you start over. You forget Brooklyn exists. You forget Jolene Collins exists. You forget her daughter exists. And if you ever contact them again, if you ever even search for them online, I'll know. And what happened this week will feel like a kindness compared to what comes next. The line went dead. Jerome opened his door. The envelope was there. Exactly as described. 500 in cash. Bus ticket for tonight's 11 p.m. departure. He packed one bag, left his keys on the counter, and disappeared into the anonymity of a city that didn't know his name. Amara noticed the change immediately. Thursday came and went without Uncle Jerome. Mama seemed lighter, smiled more, even hummed while making dinner. Friday, Mama sat her down and explained that Jerome wouldn't be coming around anymore. That she'd learned things about him that made her realize he wasn't safe. That sometimes adults make mistakes, and the important thing was correcting them. Did I? Amara started, then stopped. She couldn't ask if she'd caused this. Couldn't reveal what she'd done. You did nothing wrong, Mama said firmly, pulling her close. If anything ever happens, if anyone ever makes you uncomfortable, you tell me. Always. I'll believe you. I'll protect you. That's my job. Amara nodded against her chest, breathing in the familiar smell of hospital soap and cocoa butter. Safe. Finally safe. That weekend she went back to Brooklyn Heights. Not to find the scary man. She didn't know where he actually was when he wasn't on that bench. But to the place where her life had changed. The bench was empty. The park was full of people, joggers, families, couples taking photos with the Manhattan skyline behind them. Normal life, the kind that didn't include monsters or dollars or desperate choices. Amara sat on the bench, pulled out her dollar, the one he'd told her to keep, looked at it in the sunlight. It was wrinkled, worn, almost torn at one corner. But it was hers. Her evidence that courage mattered, that asking for help wasn't weakness, that sometimes the scariest people remembered what it meant to be human. She tucked it carefully into her backpack's smallest pocket, a talisman, a reminder. You looking for someone? She turned. A man stood nearby, not the scary man, but one of his guards, the one who'd driven the Maybach. Min Jun, though she didn't know his name. Is he here? Not today. But he wanted me to give you something. He handed her an envelope. Not money. A card. Simple white card stock with embossed edges. On it, a phone number. Nothing else. "If you ever need help again," Minjun said quietly, "you call that number. Doesn't matter when. Doesn't matter why. Someone will answer." "I can't pay." "You already did. That dollar you offered, that meant more to him than anything anyone's ever paid him, because you trusted him when you didn't have to. You saw past the monster to the man, and he wants you to know that trust goes both ways now. You're protected, always." Amara stared at the card. "Why?" Minjun crouched down to her level. "Because he was like you once, a kid who needed help and had no one to give it. He became what he became so he'd never be powerless again. But power without purpose is just noise. You reminded him of his purpose. That's a gift." He stood, started to walk away. "Tell him thank you," Amara called out. Minjun smiled, the first smile she'd seen from any of them. "He knows." Chapter 7. The Guardian. 3 months passed. Autumn turned to winter. Brooklyn dressed itself in holiday, lights and cold wind. Amara's life found rhythm, school, homework, time with Mama. The kind of ordinary that felt extraordinary when you remembered what you'd survived. Then, in December, Mama got a letter. It came from a non-profit called the Foundation for Children's Futures. Inside was a scholarship notification for Amara. Full tuition to Brooklyn Academy, one of the best private schools in the borough. Room for advancement into their high school program. Opportunities Mama had only dreamed about. "I didn't apply," Amara said, reading over her shoulder. "Neither did I." Mama's hands shook. This is thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands. Why would they?" She stopped, looked at the paperwork again. No donor listed. Just anonymous benefactor. Amara knew, felt it in her bones. This was him. Still protecting. Still remembering. Still making sure that the girl who'd offered him $1 got everything he could give in return. She started at Brooklyn Academy in January. The education was rigorous, challenging, better than anything she'd experienced. But more than that, she felt safe. Security was tight. Background checks on every adult. Protocols for protecting students. An environment where monsters couldn't reach. When she was 12, she got sick. Really sick. Pneumonia that turned serious, put her in Methodist Hospital for a week. Mama's insurance covered most of it, but not all. The remaining balance was $8,000. Impossible. Then it disappeared. "System error," the billing department said. "Your account shows paid in full." Mama argued, insisted on knowing who'd paid it, but the hospital couldn't or wouldn't say. The payment came through an anonymous charitable organization that handled medical debt for families in need. Amara knew. When she was 14, Mama's car died. Transmission gave out. Repair cost more than the car was worth. Mama started talking about taking the bus, about longer commutes, about sacrifices. A week later, a used Honda appeared in their building's parking spot. Keys in an envelope with Mama's name, title signed over, registration current, and a note. "For your service to others." Mama cried. Amara held her, and neither of them said what they both understood, that somewhere in Brooklyn, a man who the world feared was watching over them in ways that defied explanation. It continued. When Amara needed a laptop for school, one appeared. Not new, but functional, exactly what she needed. When Mama's hours got cut at the hospital, an anonymous donation came through that covered 3 months of rent. When Amara wanted to take SAT prep classes but they couldn't afford it, a scholarship magically materialized. Never extravagant, never showy. Just what they needed when they needed it from someone who understood the difference between help and charity. Protection came in other forms, too. When a boy at school started bothering Amara, nothing like Jerome, just typical teenage boundary pushing, he suddenly transferred schools mid-year. When a landlord tried to raise their rent illegally, a lawyer appeared offering free services, and the landlord backed down immediately. The message was clear. Amara Collins was under protection, invisible, untouchable, guarded by forces most people couldn't see. She never called the number on the card Min-jun had given her, never needed to, but she kept it, tucked in her wallet behind her school ID, a promise, a reminder, a lifeline if the world ever became too much again. 3 months passed. Autumn turned to winter. Brooklyn dressed itself in holiday lights and cold wind. Amara's life found rhythm, school, homework, time with Mama, the kind of ordinary that felt extraordinary when you remembered what you'd survived. Then, in December, Mama got a letter. It came from a non-profit called the Foundation for Children's Futures. Inside was a scholarship notification for Amara. Full tuition to Brooklyn Academy, one of the best private schools in the borough. Room for advancement into their high school program. Opportunities Mama had only dreamed about. "I didn't apply," Amara said, reading over her shoulder. "Neither did I." Mama's hands shook. This is thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands. Why would they?" She stopped, looked at the paperwork again. No donor listed, just anonymous benefactor. Amara knew, felt it in her bones. This was him, still protecting, still remembering, still making sure that the girl who'd offered him $1 got everything he could give in return. She started at Brooklyn Academy in January. The education was rigorous, challenging, better than anything she'd experienced. But more than that, she felt safe. Security was tight, background checks on every adult, protocols for protecting students, an environment where monsters couldn't reach. When she was 12, she got sick, really sick. Pneumonia that turned serious, put her in Methodist hospital for a week. Mama's insurance covered most of it, but not all. The remaining balance was $8,000. Impossible. Then it disappeared. "System error," the billing department said. "Your account shows paid in full." Mama argued, insisted on knowing who'd paid it. But the hospital couldn't, or wouldn't, say. The payment came through an anonymous charitable organization that handled medical debt for families in need. Amara knew. When she was 14, Mama's car died. Transmission gave out. Repair cost more than the car was worth. Mama started talking about taking the bus, about longer commutes, about sacrifices. A week later, a used Honda appeared in their building's parking spot, keys in an envelope with Mama's name, title signed over, registration current, and a note, "For your service to others." Mama cried. Amara held her, and neither of them said what they both understood, that somewhere in Brooklyn, a man who the world feared was watching over them in ways that defied explanation. It continued. When Amara needed a laptop for school, one appeared, not new, but functional, exactly what she needed. When Mama's hours got cut at the hospital, an anonymous donation came through that covered 3 months of rent. When Amara wanted to take SAT prep classes but they couldn't afford it, a scholarship magically materialized. Never extravagant, never showy, just what they needed, when they needed it, from someone who understood the difference between help and charity. Protection came in other forms, too. When a boy at school started bothering Amara. Nothing like Jerome, just typical teenage boundary pushing. He suddenly transferred schools mid-year. When a landlord tried to raise their rent illegally, a lawyer appeared offering free services, and the landlord backed down immediately. The message was clear. Amara Collins was under protection, invisible, untouchable, guarded by forces most people couldn't see. She never called the number on the card Min-jun had given her, never needed to. But she kept it, tucked in her wallet behind her school ID, a promise, a reminder, a lifeline if the world ever became too much again. Dae-hyun never saw Amara after that September afternoon in Brooklyn Heights. But he saw the reports. Min-jun updated him quarterly. How she was doing in school, whether she and her mother were safe, if anything had disrupted their lives. Watching over her became something else, not obligation, not transaction, something that resembled what normal people called caring. It changed him in ways that made his organization uncomfortable. He started asking questions about his other operations. Who got hurt? Were there children involved? Could they restructure routes to avoid neighborhoods with schools? "We're criminals," Mikhail said one night over vodka in the Sunset Park office. "Not social workers." "We're both," Dae-hyun replied. "We break laws for profit, but we're still human, still capable of choosing which laws and which costs." He shut down 3 operations that year. One involved smuggling routes through residential areas where kids played. Another involved a nightclub where the clientele regularly included minors with fake IDs. The third was a partnership with dealers who targeted college students. His profit margins decreased. His reputation as reasonable increased. Other organizations started approaching him for partnerships because he had boundaries, principles, strange concepts in their world, but valuable ones. His competitors didn't understand. "You're going soft," they said, "losing your edge." But Dae-hyun knew better. The edge was still there. Sharper, actually. Because now he knew what he was protecting. Not just territory or money or reputation. Something bigger. He was protecting the world that Amara Collins was growing up in. Making it fractionally safer. Incrementally better. One decision at a time. It started with her. But it didn't end with her. He began funding other scholarships, other medical debt payments, other families who needed a break, but had nowhere to turn, always anonymous, always carefully structured so it couldn't trace back to his criminal enterprise. His accountant protested. "This is millions. Tax implications alone." "Handle it," Dae-hyun said. "I don't care about the cost." Because he'd learned something from a 9-year-old with $1. That value wasn't about amount. It was about sacrifice, about giving everything you had, even when everything wasn't much, because someone needed help and you had the power to provide it. He'd built his empire on fear and control. But Amara Collins had reminded him that power without conscience was just destruction in slow motion. That the real legacy wasn't how much you accumulated, but what you protected and who you saved along the way. His father would have called it weakness, but his father had died alone, hated, unmourned. Dae-hyun was building something different, an empire, yes, but one with a foundation that wasn't just fear, it was justice. Messy, imperfect, criminal justice, but justice nonetheless. Amara graduated from Brooklyn Academy with honors, got accepted to NYU on a combination of merit scholarships, grants, and one very generous anonymous endowment that covered everything her other funding didn't. She was 18, standing on the edge of adulthood, and she had one thing left to do. She went back to Brooklyn Heights on a Tuesday afternoon in September. 9 years exactly since the day she'd approached a monster with $1 and asked for help. The bench overlooking the East River was empty. But she sat anyway, waited, pulled out the $1 she'd kept all these years, worn now, almost fragile, but still recognizable as legal tender. At 4:15 p.m., the black Maybach arrived. Same car, she thought. Or maybe not. Powerful men replaced things before they broke. But it felt the same. Dae-hyun emerged, older now, grey touching his temples, new lines around his eyes, but unmistakable. The tattoos, the way he moved, the danger that clung to him like cologne. He saw her, immediately. Stopped. And for a moment, she saw something in his expression that looked like pride. He walked over slowly, sat beside her on the bench. Same spot where this had all started. "Hello, Amara. You remember my name?" "I remember everything about that day. How could I forget?" She smiled. "I came to return something." She held out the dollar, the same one, worn, preserved, symbolic of something bigger than paper and ink. "You told me to keep it. I did. But I'm an adult now, and I understand what you did for me, for my mother, for my entire life since that day. And I realized something." "What's that?" "You wouldn't take my dollar because you said I'd already paid you. But you were wrong. I gave you $1. You gave me everything: education, safety, opportunity, hope. That's not balanced. That's not fair." Dae-hyun's jaw tightened. "I didn't do it for balance. I know. You did it because you remembered being powerless once. Because you saw yourself in a 9-year-old with nowhere else to turn. Because you're not just the monster everyone fears. You're the man who chose to protect instead of destroy." She pressed the dollar into his hand. "So I'm giving this back. Not as payment, as a reminder. The same way I kept it as a reminder. That courage matters. That asking for help matters. That one small action can change everything." He looked at the dollar, felt its weight. Physically nothing, symbolically everything. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Study criminal justice. Become a prosecutor, maybe. Or a defense attorney. Haven't decided. But I want to help people the way you helped me. Legally, preferably, but with the same understanding that justice isn't always what the law says it is. You'll be good at it. I learn from the best." They sat in silence for a few minutes. The East River flowed past. Manhattan glittered in the distance. The city moved around them, indifferent to this moment, yet built entirely upon moments like it are. Small encounters that shifted trajectories, that changed lives, that proved humanity persisted even in the darkest places. "I never thanked you properly," Amara said. "You thanked me with your life, with what you became. That's more than enough." She stood, started to leave, stopped. "One more thing. That card Minjun gave me, the number, I still have it. And I want you to know, if you ever need help, if you ever need someone to remember that you're more than what you had to become, call me. Because that protection, that trust, it goes both ways now." Dae-hyun felt something crack inside his chest. Not breaking, opening. The last piece of armor he'd been wearing finally falling away. "I'll remember that." Amara walked away, confident, strong, safe, everything he'd hoped she'd become. Dae-hyun looked at the dollar in his hand, thought about framing it, keeping it on his desk, a reminder of the day a 9-year-old taught him what courage really looked like. But instead, he stood, walked to the edge of the park where a homeless man sat with a cardboard sign asking for help. He handed him the dollar. "It's not much," Dae-hyun said, "but it's everything." The man looked confused. "It's just $1. It's more than that. It's proof that one small thing can change everything. That giving what you have, even when it's not enough, is still worth doing." That kindness has value beyond measure. He walked back to his car. Minjun was waiting, saw something different in his boss's expression. "Good meeting?" he asked. "The best one I've ever had," Daehyun replied. As they drove away, he looked back once, saw Amara disappearing into the crowd, ordinary yet extraordinary, protected yet independent, safe yet brave. 9 years ago, she'd given him $1 and asked him to remember his humanity. Today, she'd given it back and reminded him that some debts can't be repaid in money. Only in becoming better than you were, only in protecting what matters, only in understanding that power without purpose is just noise, but power with purpose. That could change the world. $1 at a time. End.